Hello, we are back with Voters Organized to Educate. I'm Bruce Riley. I'm here with my esteemed colleague Earl, and we've got none other than Council Member at Large JP Morrell, and we're gonna get right into it. Part of our interview series here. So JP, tell us just for the folks a little about yourself, why you're running for re-election.
My name is JP Morrell. I'm the president of New Orleans City Council. I was a legislator for about 14 years. In that capacity, I did a lot of work with vote. We repealed non-unanimous juries. We worked with Pat Smith, Representative Pat Smith, to restore the right to vote to those who were formerly incarcerated. We raised the age for juveniles that could be charged with adult crimes, as well as a slew of other things. But as the city council president, what I have been primarily focused on is bringing accountability and transparency to government and making government work for the people of the city of New Orleans. I mean, most importantly, there's a couple of things that really were kind of ridiculous when I got there. One was that as the only Democratic city in Louisiana, we had an administration that would not recognize our local union. And when we came in, they had been negotiating the union contract for several years. And so the council had to be put in the awkward position of basically legislating that the city had to negotiate a union contract to give them the leverage to finally get that contract done. Also, I did a tremendous amount of work trying to help a lot of our retirees with COLAs, because what we found is that a couple of councils back, under Council Member Stacy Head, they had actually changed the requirements for a COLA to be issued to dang near 90% solvency, which is unheard of, because basically there's almost no pension at 90% solvency because people are constantly paying into it. So working with retirees, the city of New Orleans, we lowered that to what the state and national average was, and for the first time in almost half a decade, we're able to give seniors and retirees COLA. So just we're trying to figure out all these parts of government that aren't working and trying to figure out how to make them work.
Okay, great, thanks. Well, I'll turn over to Earl to get the first question going.
How you doing?
Hey, Earl.
Nice to meet you again.
Again.
Yeah. I'm gonna start off with affordable housing.
Yes.
This is gonna be some paraphrasing here.
Okay.
If you don't mind. New Orleans is we need housing, right? We could agree on that. All right. So to set aside for affordable housing, how will you make those dollars turn into actual homes? And what guarantees do you have that this won't just be big subsidy for the corporations that make less than 10% of their units so-called affordable?
Well, the set aside, you're talking about the trust fund.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Okay. So the city council, under the leadership of Councilmember Leslie Harris, passed a trust fund which sets aside a portion of our annual budget for affordable housing. And the conversations being had is how we're going to use, for the first year, it's about $17 million, how we're going to leverage that to do affordable housing. Now, the reality is the cost of the city building affordable housing, due to the nature of how we publicly bid things, is very, very expensive. So to get the most bang for the buck, you really have to leverage it as part of other incentive packages. There is certainly a lot of concern that we could have another American Can situation, where you give a tremendous amount of resources. For those of you who know the American Can situation, there was American Can, which is on the Bayou St. John, was given a tremendous amount of subsidies, property tax, pilots, restoration tax abatement, and for affordable housing. That affordable housing lasted for 10 years. To the day, on the 10th year, last day, they evicted everybody out of there that was there on an affordable unit. And so something this council has struggled with, and I don't mean struggle in a bad way, but we're very cognizant of, is that when we're looking at different programs that purport to want to get resources. And it's part of the reason why I've been working to restructure the Industrial Development Board, because they give away a lot of those credits, and they don't make the requirements onerous enough. If you're going to give someone a pilot, if you're going to have them pay less property tax and get all these incentives, there has to be more teeth as far as what the obligation is by the developer. So, one, to answer your question, we take the $17 million, develop several different programs. Part of that money is going to go towards dealing with homelessness. So we also going to have to take some of that money to fund Nate Field's office to deal with resources for homeless people. We haven't decided how much that's going to be yet. Leslie's kind of leading that effort, but we're working with her. We're going to take a chunk of that money and say, this money right here is going to be the gap financing to get major affordable housing done, probably by private developers, because most affordable housing is done by private developers. The trick there is going to be how you develop a program using the Industrial Development Board, using that money, and using whatever credits are available through the Louisiana Housing Finance Authority to put together a package that A, will lead to affordable housing, but B, not have us have affordable housing, to your point, because we still have this problem of, I have 90 units, 10 will actually be affordable, but the moment that I can kick those 10 people out, they're out. I had a bill filed by Jason Hughes 2 sessions ago where I tried to completely restructure the Industrial Development Board to deal with the issue of the giveaways. That bill didn't go forward because the Industrial Development Board sent us correspondence saying that we can change their entire board and their rule structure by ordinance. So what I've been working on for about 1.5 years is trying to figure out how I want to restructure how they give away money to make sure that when they give away money for affordable housing, it's actually affordable, because many times they say market rate, and market rate is not affordable. Market rate downtown for housing for a worker in the hospitality industry. They had one project I helped kill, which was Punch Bowl Social, where they were giving away rooms in a cohabitory unit, in the room, just the bed in the room was $1,500.
Like a dorm.
Like there was a dorm.
Efficiency.
It was literally, they were just bedrooms and they have a shared kitchen.
Yeah.
So the Industrial Development Board had said that that's affordable, and many people opposed it, and it died ultimately, saying that is not affordable. A $1,500 room where you don't even have access to your own kitchenette, your own refrigerator, that's what you have to combat. So yes, the money's important. Yes, it's part of a larger program, but reform with the Industrial Development Board so they stop giving away money, because that money they give away also impacts us, because when they give away property taxes, that's less money in the budget to go towards the whole affordable housing fund.
Should we be looking into proposals on building our own housing with that money?
Well, I will tell you that the most effective way to build affordable housing that is not corporate and not private developers is not-for-profits. Not-for-profits give a tremendous return because their margin is not profit. Their margin is developing more and more money and training to build more housing. Yeah. In the parts of the country where you see affordable housing really making gains, it's because the nonprofit community develops a housing program around it. Government is the least elegant solution to building housing, especially in the modern day, because you have to go through a very lengthy process, through the entire contracting process, the oversight process. We can build, for the length of time it takes us to build an affordable house, it'll be over budget in 3 years from now.
We can probably create, 30 units at cost of what it, like there's a 4-bedroom reentry house. We created the Diamond House right behind us. As you know, the first 72 plus is, we're getting things done for a few $100,000, whereas it seems like developers need like over $1 million a bedroom or something.
Well, and the thing is, to your point, developers always want to build a scale, so they don't want to build a fourplex. They want to build basically build a 50, 60 person unit. Yeah. So what they're doing is, when they're doing their estimation of how to make profit, they're looking at what corners they can cut to maximize profit while developing something close to what they promised. Nonprofits, there's a number of Eugene Green sites. I hate to quote Eugene, but there was one project the city was involved in where each unit was over $300,000 for a unit.
Yeah.
For a unit, per unit.
Buy a whole house someplace.
Right. So when you look at the incentives the developer had put together, when you looked at how they're leveraging federal and state and other tax credits, the price came out. That's why I said the most efficient way to do this is it is amazing when you compare how much it costs for Habitat for Humanity to build a house versus how much it costs for government to build a house. It's totally different.
bloated.
Bloated. It's bloated. Plus, the challenge you have there also is like I said, because there are so many necessary steps in contracting at the government level.
So answer this. So the learning experience from the
Right.
incident. How feasible is it that you could actually take standing structures, blighted properties around and take that particular what you did with and just remodel that with a better structure?
I didn't do HRI. I think.
No, I'm not saying you. I'm saying that's a learn. we.
Well, so first you'd have to make sure you find blighted structures that are up to code. Mm-hmm. So like it's much easier for, like y'all said, with your fourplex and duplexes, flipping those is very affordable. The problem is for nonprofits that makes sense because you're operating on the margins, you're operating efficiently. For a developer, they don't want to touch a fourplex or a duplex. They want to build one big building they can pull all of their credits and all their developer fees out of. That's why like you don't see people building single and double family homes affordable because developers who want to make a lot of money, they don't make a lot of money that way. They make money for planned communities, but that's planned communities they're going to sell for ridiculous amounts of money to rich people. So in the city, there's an opportunity. Part of what we've been trying to do with Anthony Davis with all of our blight enforcement is to get the city in ownership of more blighted property because there's plenty of blighted property that can be rehabbed. We don't own it yet. But if the city does blight enforcement correctly, does the liens, and gets that property into our hands, there's a tremendous opportunity to work with nonprofits and say, hey, if you're going to develop 50 affordable houses, here are 50 lots. The city will give them to you at cost or whatever the liens were on it or whatever, and you move forward with it. And that could be a very easy way. I mean, a lot of people talk about, was all this blighted property, the city should use up with it, but they miss a couple of steps. Just because the property is blighted doesn't mean the city owns it. And part of the problem we've had for years is that when property was blighted, the person who owns, the slumlord who owns the blighted property would do the bare minimum for the city not to seize it. So if a property was blighted and the city cited them because the grass wasn't cut and the windows were busted, they would cut the grass, put a couple of windows in, and every time that it would reset the process of the city doing acquisition. I passed an ordinance 2 years ago that changed the definition of blight to be no power and no water. So when a property has no power and no water, and Anthony Davis cites it now, the only way to stop that fine from running is to give it power and water. Slum landlords don't do that. If they got a blighted piece of property as investment property, in order to get a electrical permit, they'd have to go actually put wiring in the house. To get a meter drop, they'd have to actually go fix the pipes. That's a way we're trying to get those properties in the possession of the city, and then we can leverage those to third parties so that they can do something.
Great. Well, let's speaking of sort of inefficiencies and challenges like that, let's talk about something that everybody's talking about. I know you've talked about it. Is the infrastructure, the roads, the sewage and water board, cones for miles. What can the city do, and I guess why have they not done it yet, around getting contractors to finish a job before they start another one, and or along with, as you talked about, efficiencies of trying to dig once. I mean, why haven't we done this already? Why are we just complaining about it?
I can tell you, when we came into office in 2022, let me go back a little further. First term, Mayor Cantrell, coming off of Mitch Landrieu. Mitch was doing streets in a very specific kind of organized way, one at a time, close, you get the next street. When the federal government was looking at our spend from the $2 billion street plan, we were not spending fast enough according to them. Mayor Cantrell gets elected, she brings in Ramsey Green, and his solution is, I'm going to open all the streets up and do as many as possible as quickly as possible. Now the big mistake that was made, and I've been very upfront about this, is when Mitch Landrieu was doing the streets, it was slower, but he did best bid. As in, when he was evaluating companies, if a company had a history of running over project, if it had a history of suits or unfinished projects, he disqualified them. When Ramsey came in, he said lowest bid. And so all the companies that have been pushed out all came back in. And what you saw happen over that first 4-year period is all the streets were open, and you had companies that were on block 1 with the street open bidding on block 2. And they were using the money from block 1 to open up block 2 and so on and so forth. So what you saw up until through COVID was that a lot of streets were open, but not a lot of work was being done. Ramsey Green left about 6 months into our term, and Joe Threat got his job. Joe Threat's position was, we're not opening any more streets. We're going to close the ones that are open and get ahead of those. What happened, and the council discovered this last year, that $2 billion is gone. So many of those projects that were given to those construction companies that had previously been disqualified, previously had problems, they all went over budget, did shoddy work, and spent all the money. So we are several $100 million short from what was supposed to be done with the $2 billion that was original. Part of what is in the bond issuance going to the public is more money to get those roads done. I have talked to many of the people running for mayor, and I've said you have to get away from this lowest bid process, because lowest bid does two things. One, you get the crappiest company, and two, you eliminate pretty much all union labor, because to do a job right costs this price. Like if you're bidding a house and you have 3 guys give you a price for electrical work and they're all around the same number, and some other guy gives you one that's a third of the price, the first thing you're gonna think is this guy's unlicensed and has never done anything in his whole life. The city for the last couple years has been giving that guy all the work. Right. And so when it comes to the streets and the roads, I think when it comes to sewage and water board, consolidated drainage is going to solve a lot of the digging twice, because up until this year, when we got the sewage and water board to consolidate drainage, pipes that were below 18 inches were owned by DPW, and pipes that were over 8 inches were owned by sewage and water board. They would both be separately doing pipe work on streets. We consolidated that and said, no, all drainage pipes are sewage and water board. Catch basins, DPW is doing catch basins poorly. We consolidated that in the sewage and water board, and we have to give them more money, but they're actually doing a really good job of cleaning. I mean, I have people that have said, I've never seen my catch basin cleaned, and they came through and cleaned it. They're doing it very methodically. So I think that we're in a better place than we were when we started, but we came in behind the 8 ball on streets.
Yeah, I hate to do comparative success because I have to go to Jefferson Parish a lot, and I see a bunch of like road work. The longest I've seen a infrastructure rebuild is the Harvey Tunnel.
You have an absolute right to compare, because we should be compared in a lot of ways to the people around us. Now, 2 things in Jefferson I'd make you aware of. One, they have no sewage and water board. Department of Public Works is everything. And if we had a singular department, there would be a lot of efficiencies there. I spent almost a decade in the legislature trying to figure out how to get rid of sewage and water board. The problem is that it's in our charter, it's in state law, and more importantly, a whole bunch of funding mechanisms for sewage and water board specifically say sewage and water board. Because there's a lot. I mean, I actually got into a huge argument with BGR over this, because I said, look, you guys are always telling us recommendations. Why don't you explain to the public that we could dissolve sewage and water board over 8-10 years, have one department, and that department would be very efficient, but no one wants to kind of pull off that Band-Aid. And I mean, I pulled at it when I was in the legislature. I pulled at it here. I fought sewage and water board over the bills and everything else. But so 1, they have one department, and 2, Jefferson Parish does best bid. They don't do lowest bid. And I'm telling you, if you pay the extra that's appropriate to get the right company with union labor to do the work gets done fast and right. When you try to save a buck on the front end, and then the person does 3 change orders, so the ultimate project is above the original cost, and they're using scab labor or people who walk off the site, you get what we have. So, I mean, I've done some work, as y'all know, trying to change the contracting structure in the city to make it more transparent so that the council can identify when we see bad contracts going out. We're actually in litigation with Charles Rice right now over that council oversight, but it's important because we are the ones, when things aren't built because we run out of money, we are the ones, for better or worse, and I would say it's appropriate, who get attacked, the council. And so for us, we need more oversight on how the money's spent, because at the end of the year, when the mayor says this is our budget for next year, We are the ones who are tasked with finding the money to patch the holes. If we don't know how the money is being spent, where's a blank check?
Well, let's. I mean, that ties into something else you've been vocal about, which is around the sheriff and the brass
Right.
contracting. And I noticed that the ordinance proposal includes the district attorney's office, the clerk of court, and we know from our past experience, even with the former sheriff, like that contracting process has a lot of veils over it, and we were trying to get, particularly under Gusman and building that new jail, and now building this expansion, right? And what's behind it all? Can you tell us a little bit about what we, the public, is that more so the city can see on the brass contracting
No,
side?
the public.
The
The public can see on that. So the entire brass system, it's a bit obtuse, but it's available to the public, and every contract in brass is a public record. So the dance we have to do is New Orleans is very unique in that in most cities, criminal justice organizations, NOPD, the sheriff's office, they're all funded through their own direct millages. In the city of New Orleans, they come to us, judges, DA, and go, here's how much money we want, and we have to somehow prioritize their requests with fixing your street. Part of the frustration that we've had as a council, well, I've had for this term, but council's had for years is, especially with the sheriff's office, they come and say, I need $40 million, cut what you have to cut to give me the money. And it's like, it gets to a point where you begin to realize, and that kind of happened with the legislative auditor after the jailbreak, no one knew the sheriff had money at all, and that there was money that they could have contributed. And it's not an issue of the city not funding the jail, it's that we only have to put all our cards on the table and know who has what money so that we can all say, let's both take a cut to get this done. Because when we were forced to build phase 3, we had to cut street projects and recreation projects in all 5 council districts to come up with the money to do phase 3. It was part of the argument against phase 3 is you're making us cut like recreational centers and road work, and basically Judge Afford told us to pound sand. But the goal with having all those criminal justice partners in brass is we need to know how they're spending their money. For most part, whether you're the sheriff, the DA, or the judges, we can't tell them how to spend their money because they're all in state law, they're all in the state constitution. All we're trying to do is get transparency with how they spend it, because if you're spending money badly and I have to cut projects across the city for you to do things, that's a problem. But if you're transparent and you need the money, it really puts the onus on us to find the money. You see what I'm saying?
But what if, so for instance, taking the jail's budget as, we're kind of most
Right.
familiar with the types of things that, that they got to spend on. A lot of it, of course, is staffing and everything that goes with that. And then there's the maintenance piece around so much infrastructure. But then there's other things like, opioid treatment programs, or, as you know, we went to the council and talked about needing free phone calls for people, and the jail saying like, well, if I do that, then I'm going to have like $100,000 or $200,000 hole in my budget. Would you guys, if you were looking at these things as line items, would you then be saying, okay, we're going to fund this, but not that. We're going to fund this, but not that?
I don't think, I can tell you from my perspective, just me, because I can't speak to all the council members, that's not how I would approach it. I would say, how much money do you have? This is how much you have. This is how much your shortfall is. I would look through there and say, what are your priorities? Now, when it comes to funding phone calls and stuff like that, I feel like the best place for the council to be is to try and work with the sheriff's office and third parties, could be nonprofits, the like, to figure out how we patch that hole. But when it comes to things like the most important issue that I think the sheriff and I would agree on is pay. Pay for people working at the jail is entirely too small, and we're not getting qualified people. The reason why you have a lot of incidents is because with the low pay they have, you don't get the best quality person.
What is their pay kind of relative to the NOPD pay?
Oh, it's much lower. It's much lower, but when you look at the requirements to become a post-certified NOPD officer, to be a post-certified NOPD officer versus being a sheriff on the tiers, it's night and day. There's much more training required for an NOPD officer versus a sheriff. Part of what's very weird about New Orleans and our NOPD sheriff system is that in every other parish, the sheriff is also law enforcement. Mm-hmm. So every sheriff is a post-certified everything, like an NOPD officer. The reason why we've gotten away so long with having underpaid sheriffs is because you have when NOPD is competing to have the best possible officer, they're competing with every law enforcement agency around the greater New Orleans area. A deputy sheriff in our jail is not qualified to be a sheriff in any other parish. Most of them aren't post certified. Most of them don't have the extensive background checks. Most of them go through an academy. So the choice you have is that you have to really look at our deputy sheriffs almost like you look at Department of Public Safety personnel who run prisons, who are not commissioned necessarily officers. We're still underpaying them. They should be making probably $20-$25 minimum. And
So-
right now they're making not near that.
And so it sounds like, and also the fact that, and maybe she had the budget for it, but is not paying it because, you know, every company or organization knows, oh, we want 50 people, we only have 40, but we got money for the other 10 if we can get them on board. I mean, she's got a hold of lots of people that she's trying. It seems like this is the sad reckoning. Who at the city, other than the sheriff and the police department, have like hundreds of roles to fill? Because that says a lot about our community.
I would say that the departments that are as depleted as the sheriff and the police department. I mean, you can make an argument how depleted, how many cops you need. So for the sake of argument, we'll say they're depleted. Safety and permits is completely gutted at this point. Code enforcement's actually in a pretty good place because Anthony Davis, part of the problem we have with a lot of these different departments, not the sheriff, but the other ones, is every budget cycle we say, tell us how many people you need and we'll budget for it. The challenge you have is that most departments are told by the CAO, this is what you're getting. And what they're getting might need what they need. And what we tried to do over 4 years is say, tell me what you need, not what you said you can get, because you're going to be judged by what you said you needed. And so safety and permits in particular has had a tremendous fall off in employees, but they've never asked for pay raises. They've never asked for those things that could support the department. NORD, code enforcement, they show up and go, I can't do the work with this amount of money. I need more money. And then it puts on the council the requirement to figure out how to balance a budget to give them the money they need. The challenge for us is when departments don't show up and say what they need, we don't know what they need because we're not the head of that department. With the sheriff, I think the real missed opportunity with Sheriff Hudson is that I feel like from the moment she got in, it's like she was under siege. And I think that there were opportunities that if there had been more transparency and candid conversations, rather than saying, I got this, there's nothing to see here. Like, honestly, what should have happened, and hopefully with the way Brass is working now, whoever gets this job is going to walk in with their eyes open knowing how bad things are. Because I think that I've never been accused of this. When things are bad, I say it because I think the public has a right to know. I think trying to show the public a united front that everything's really working out when they see things crumbling around them, this is not a land of people. These are all adults. You don't need to give them like a bedtime story like they're children and we're their parents. When I see things not working, I call them out, which makes people upset sometimes, but you can't change something until it's faced. And I feel like the problem in the city of New Orleans is with a lot of things, whether it's the sheriff's office, whether it's safety of permits, whether it's the roads, people, they want to do just enough so that you'll stop yelling at them, but they don't want to solve the underlying problem because solving the underlying problem is too hard. I don't think it's too hard. I think it's going to be painful. I think having a real streets program that's transparent where people know my street, like Jefferson Parish, they can tell you any street that's getting repaired, it'll be fixed in 2027. They can literally give you a list. The city of New Orleans has avoided doing that, and we have fought with them over because they don't want to disappoint someone by telling their street, you know what, I'd rather know my street's going to be fixed in 2027 than it's not going to get fixed at all. And so, like, that is a consistent thing that we've been having aggressive conversations over.
With mental health, so I mean, Hurricane Katrina, the anniversary. I'd be happy when we move past this part. But what are some of the things that we can do? I know state level, we maybe, I don't know, but what can we do here locally to combat like the crisis of mental health issues that's running rampant in our streets?
Well, I think the mobile crisis unit that we've stood up has yielded dividends. The outcomes we've had for people that are in mental crisis when they're approached by a mental health professional versus a police officer has been overwhelmingly successful. The biggest problem we have with mobile crisis units is we need 3 or 4 of them. Because right now we have one because we could afford, and it was kind of a pilot, but the outcomes have been so tremendously better. We've also spent a tremendous amount of money in making mental health services available to children in the schools. With Thrive Kids, we put money in the school board, about $5 million, to bring social workers back to schools. And we started doing that 3 years ago. Something I always say is that when you look at the precipitous drop in crime in New Orleans, it's not because we're policing more. The police department has not grown. If anything, it's kind of stayed the same. We have, Jenna Vegno is a big part of that. Y'all know the head of our Department of Health. Like, we're spending money on violence interruption, on resources to kid, mental health, diversion, re-entry. This is what keeps crime down because people don't choose to go into crime. Usually they're desperate. That's how they end up there. I mean, I was a public defender. I used to defend all the time people who, like, they did petty crime because it was the way they got by or took care of their family. When you give alternatives, like I tell people all the time, when we came in 2021, everybody was like, I'm going to shoot the kid who's jiggling my handle. Surprise, we fund through the council fund after school programs and alternative services. If you give a kid something else to do besides risking their life to jiggle a door handle, they're going to do it.
Aren't those schools also like getting a bit more desperate and for funding based on like state and federal cuts? Because I have a friend who has been doing mental health care in the schools for years, and she's moved her way. She's like a senior level person
Right.
who rocks out. And her school, just a few months ago was like, well, we can only fund 2 and we have to go with like the cheaper one. And so she's out, and then she starts moving around. She's like, I got to go to Jefferson Parish. Like,
Jefferson Parish, and this is sad to say because I said you got to compare apples to apples. Jefferson Parish is a dedicated village just to dealing with kids and juvenile detentions. That's why their juvenile courts are better, well staffed. They have better rehabilitation. They have better alternative programming. That's something we need to do. We need to have a separate millage for a funding stream. Now, as far as the schools go, you're 100% right. Between federal rescission and between the state constantly tweaking the MFP formula, the city is going to constantly. I mean, the whole reason why we have early child care in New Orleans is because we passed a millage to do it ourselves. The state never funded it. It was one of the big lies. Conrad Appel and I used to fight us all the time. He'd say, I passed universal pre-K, and I'd say, you didn't fund it. What's the point of creating a universal pre-K program, running as a candidate on it, and then every year you put not a dollar into it? So you create a framework, and it's kind of the thing Republicans do. They say they do something, like it's performative, but if you're not going to say what part of state government am I going to dedicate the revenue to do that, they never did. So locally, we passed a millage that created early childhood. We're probably going to have to, in order to have sustainable mental health at the school level, we're probably going to pass a millage just for that.
I mean, the Baton Rouge, a few years back, as I'm sure you know, had the millage for the mental health diversion space, the Bridge Center, and that passed overwhelmingly. And people decided to put, I think it was $50 million. They said, yeah, no problem. This is something that we want to put our money in.
And the thing is that you want to do something like that at a time like this, where people are seeing the dividends of us doing alternative stuff and alternative programs, because if you try to pass something like that when you're in a crime spike or crisis, people get scared and tend to only want to dedicate money to traditional ways of fighting crime, like fighting the crime in the street. So when people are seeing this precipitous drop in crime locally, when they're seeing that non-law enforcement funding is leading to that, that's when you say, how do we make this sustainable? Do you want to see us be at the 20-year low forever? Well, we have to fund these programs, because right now they're all funded, but ironically, we have a $100 million deficit, 70 of which is police overtime.
And realistically, I mean, I feel like the case for, let's say, mobile crisis unit is saying, like, okay, this is how much we spend on a mobile crisis unit. I don't know how many exact people it is,
right.
5 people or 3 people, whatever it may be. This is how much we spend on that. That adds up to this many police officers. And so, for argument's sake, with the police car, with the other subsidies that might go with having a police officer, it might be that 2 police officers add up to like 10 mobile crisis people.
Well, I
and
mean,
you say, well, why don't we,
well, it's not just that, because like when you have someone who's in crisis and you admit them to a hospital for a stay, in most cases they have some level of coverage, even if it's just Medicare or Medicaid. When you bring them to prison, we pay for them.
Yeah.
So like the whole trajectory of that person and our cost. It's sort of like how we fought so many years at the state level to try and get medical pardons, because it makes no sense for the state when you have people who are medically compromised, dying of cancer. If you keep them incarcerated, they're going to die anyway. The state's footing the entire bill. If you medically pardon someone, the moment they leave the jail, the federal government picks up the cost. And it's like, sometimes you have to kind of, I mean, y'all know, Bruce, when we were at the legislature, when we were doing that limited reform under Jindal, what Republicans understood was, here's how you're going to save money. And you will be surprised how many times we passed substantial criminal justice reform just saying, hey, you're going to save $10 million. Oh, I like $10 million. I don't really care about the fact that this might get me dinged by, so-and-so against violence.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, oh no, go ahead.
Oh, well, okay. So let's talk about reentry and anti-discrimination. As you know, we've got this ordinance on the ballot this coming election,
Right.
that is designed to move us towards a space where we're not discriminating against people anymore based on criminal history. The way that we've been seeing it is not just about sort of our rights, our fight, our whatever. It's also about the discriminators. How do we move our city so whether it be the companies, the employers, the landlords, how they do less discrimination?
Well, I mean, I think part of what we always have the ability to do, just like the whole reason why the city has a DBE program, is that we tell our contractors, this is our value, and in order to do business with the city of New Orleans, you have to adhere to our values. What the real benefit I see with the charter amendment y'all have and the ordinance dealing with, ban in the box like 7.0, is that we will have the ability when we're doing contracting with companies saying, hey, you want to contract with us? You can't discriminate against people based on their former history. And there's a tremendous amount of work, whether it be in the professional service space, whether it be the construction space or the like. Also, it's helpful because part of the group that does the most work to rehabilitate people and make them job accessible are unions. Unions take formerly incarcerated people all the time, get them an apprenticeship, get them in the programs. Going back to that comment I made before about the lowest bid, how does it help any of them if when we have contracts to let, we incentivize companies that don't use unions, don't want to adhere to basic things that are our values, just to get a job done badly and over budget? So I think part of our leverage there is going to be, once that becomes part of our charter, it gets incorporated into all of our DBE and other programs, and it's a condition of you doing business with the city of New Orleans. Now, I would love, but because the state's the state, if we can do it at the state level where we defeat preemption. But I always feel like, from our perspective as a city, we have to lead by example. If the stories we heard during the debate regarding the charter amendment, hearing from people who are city employees who are discriminated against, that's heartbreaking. Because if we're doing it, how the hell are you going to judge somebody in the private sector doing it? And so I think that's going to be the real, at least initially, I think the first thing that we need to do after it's passed, when we come in with a new council, is really restructure the DBE program to incorporate it into it, so that companies that are applying for city contracts know you better not be looking at people's criminal history with the goal of discriminating against them.
Thank you. Earl?
We talked a little bit about affordable housing, short-term rentals. When I'm out canvassing,
Yeah.
I see a lot of those boxes on the doorknobs, and I can't help but wonder, somebody could be actually renting those. Do you think short-term rentals run an impediment to affordable housing, or is it separate, or the two?
No, it's absolutely an impediment to affordable housing. As you know, when we came in 2021, the city was being sued by Airbnb and the short-term rental companies over the previous ordinance dealing with short-term rentals. We got a decision back in 2022, 2023, where the court said throughout the entire short-term rental law. We created a new law which was much more restrictive. There is only one short-term rental per block, residential, and there was an exception process. People who lost the lottery, who needed it for insurance or whatever, that's gone away. To your point, Airbnb in particular, VRBO too, but Airbnb does not care if their practices destroy communities. When short-term rentals were first a thing, going back to probably 2016, when Mitch Landrieu got the council to offer an ordinance, Helena and I both wrote op-eds saying, do not even do short-term rentals, because we already saw in San Francisco, people were losing their minds because the housing stock disappeared. The city, because it was chasing revenue, did it anyway. The original short-term rental law literally was the Wild Wild West. You have people from New York buying houses sight unseen. They throw a mattress in there and say short-term rental. 2019, they tried to put the toothpaste back in the tube, and they kind of put half of it back in there. I think we finally come in and really put four corners on it, in particular because we did something called platform accountability. Part of what these Airbnb relies upon is that when we send out code enforcement, safety, and permits to shut a short-term rental down, Airbnb would relist that same property like an hour later, because there was no requirement that they check to make sure it was properly permitted. We changed the law, which they're already suing us over, and it went in effect on August 1st, where before Airbnb can list the property, they have to check to make sure the permit's valid. What the Tom's Picking already covered, thousands of properties got delisted because Airbnb didn't want to get sued. So we already saw, if you drive around some of those same neighborhoods, there's a lot of houses for sale now. There's a lot of units available for rental, because once Airbnb delisted them, the only place they can go to is Craigslist, and no one wants to lease their condo on Craigslist. You'll get a squatter in there who will never leave. So to your point, residential is a problem. Commercial is really a problem, because that's where they're trying to convert apartment complexes into short-term rentals. And those are the units that, for someone who is in the service industry, someone who can't afford to buy a home, those are real critical units. Leslie and I put a interim zoning district over the commercials after that monstrosity in Mid-City, where it was supposed to be affordable housing. It turned into like an STR resort. I forget what it was. It was probably somewhere past Blue Plate. But after that, we dropped an interim zoning district, which has been there all 3 years. The City Planning Commission's coming back with a transient lodging study sometime before the end of the year, and that's going to give us the research to be able to finally regulate that fully, but it's going to be very restrictive.
Yeah, because I used to pick up stuff from Airbnbs in the CBD,
Right.
And they had entire floors, and they didn't buy them; they were actually renting them and then re-renting them.
Well,
entire floors.
Well, there was a company. God, it starts with an S. There was a company. Saunders. Thank you. Saunders, which their whole model was, Saunders would come in to a condominium complex, and they would say, if these are vacation rentals, you rent them to us, we'll list them on Airbnb. Saunders is gone because of the regulations we put in place to make it harder to just blanket list units. Honestly, Airbnb as a whole nationally is doing very, very poorly. A lot of these companies that only profit from not being regulated usually fall off when they're regulated. And right now, New Orleans, New York, and San Francisco more than us, now that we've found ways to regulate them, they're not nearly as wildly profitable as it was. Because if you can't get together with some buddies in New York and buy up 4 houses and put them up on Airbnb the next day, it's not worth coming down here. That's kind of the environment we're trying to create.
And they killed the part that actually did work. And I was an Airbnb host while I was in law school, and rented out my place while I'd go visit my daughter.
Right.
And that would kind of pay for the trip, and then it was like a win-win, right? And that was the initial concept, right? It was almost like rent your place out while you go to Disney World during Mardi Gras, right? And then it turned into this like crazy.
It was the homestead exemption piece.
You know?
See, in the original 2019 law, the fix was to say in order to rent or lease an Airbnb, you have to have a homestead exemption, which proves you own the house and you live there. The federal court threw out the homestead exemption, which is why we had to go back in 20. Not only they throw it out, Judge Linnell gave us 60 days to make a new law. So we had to basically go in there in 60 days, write a whole new law, and it'd be defensible, which it ended up being defensible. But had we been able to defeat the Commerce Clause and have a homestead exemption, it really would have made it like it was sold to us, which is a resident is leasing their place or a room when they're not using their house to make money. And that would have prevented a lot of the out-of-town guys from just buying up property sight unseen because they don't live here. The problem is federal court said, not so fast. And once you take the homestead exemption requirement out, we have a requirement that you have to be on premises, but even that at the Fifth Circuit they're looking at. So, but the framework we created, but with one per block now, hard stop, one per block, a lottery if there's multiple people, it's not going to make everyone happy. It still lets some people what really made people like Freddie and I even do the exception in a limited way is that there were a tremendous amount of people, particularly older people, who it's the only way they could afford their homeowners insurance because it went up so high. So we tried to do something that was fair, and then the moment we felt like fairness had run its course, we cut out the exception, and now it's one per square block. And with the platform accountability in, now that people, the funniest thing was, not to digress a second, how many people had legal commercial and residential STRs who let the permits lapse because we weren't enforcing it. And when platform accountability kicked in and Airbnb delisted, they ran in to get their permit renewed and said the permit said, we have a new policy, you have no permit. So that's why a lot of these properties are getting listed because they thought they could kind of operate in the wild, wild west still, but once that platform accountability piece clicked in and they can't get listed on Airbnb anymore, they're just dumping it and leaving.
So you bring up, the whole thing brings a great point about the tension between us trying to control our city, and then of course interstate commerce and other things, federal courts, and we've seen this in so many ways. And so now I think what a lot of people are seeing around the country is the MAGA wave of like sort of totalitarianism. Our National Guard, instead of being ready in case there's a hurricane on the eve of Katrina celebration, bad word,
right.
Memorial. They're in D.C. where there's lots of states as National Guard. Some people, I have some friends up there. We all know some people. It's almost like feeling occupied, right? It's almost like tanks or troops going around
with guns.
Yeah, and with guns and stop people from filming. They don't really know the law. We know that I think Trump this morning I was reading he did make an order saying it's illegal to burn the flag, which the U.S.
Supreme Court
has said you can't, right? We've seen a judge just said that desecration of a Israel flag, a foreign flag, was improper. See if that holds up. I think that there was a law that Trump was talking about trying to make burning of the Israeli flag illegal when despite the American flag you can burn.
Right.
So all that to say, with the lack of protections around things like First Amendment and Fourth Amendment and ICE with their masked agents, we're really trying to get a feel of, where do our city politicians, where do our government officials feel that we are on that standing of protecting our residents from a federal onslaught of agencies?
It is the primary reason why I've been so vocally opposed to the surveillance ordinance. Because the thing is, right now, we have to assume we are the ideal kind of city that a Trump would target. We are a blue island in a sea of red with a governor that is Trump friendly. And so far, the tensions have held insofar as New Orleans is really the cash cow for the state. So I think part of what's held them off from doing anything too overt is that once the cash cow tourism destination, if it became an occupied walled city, we'd have no money and we'd go bankrupt.
Nobody wants to come here if it's just a police
right.
state, right?
But that being said, there are lots of other sinister ways that you can allow the federal government in particular to intervene with the city. Part of the issue, the whole of the issue with surveillance is that, first off, the surveillance law we had, that was a compromise, has already been broken. That was the whole Washington Post article. So first off, I don't ever believe in rewarding bad behavior. So if you broke the old law, why am I giving you an easier new law? Second,
was anybody held accountable for that?
The Kirkpatrick has an investigation which is not resolved yet, but she did open one to see who was involved in getting the notices. Then you add to the fact that Senator James Morris passed a bill that is in the state of Louisiana that says that not a public official, public servant, public employee, if you do not actively aid ICE, you can go to jail. So you put those two things together, and then you talk about let's go and have governmental surveillance throughout the city of New Orleans. And the clause they put in the bill, which they thought fixed it, but I think really will probably lead the author to get arrested, is saying you can't work with ICE in this bill. Well, on its face, and I've had several lawyers look at it, if you pass this bill, the state police can arrest the people who passed the bill. Because you're literally in the bill saying don't work with ICE. So it's a problem because the law will conflict with the state law. But more importantly, there is no universe in which I believe if we had institutionalized state surveillance across the entire city, and something people don't talk about is that inside of that ordinance, everybody talks about the video, it makes cell site simulation easier to do.
Yeah.
And that's literally peeking in your cell phone. So it's way worse than people think it is. But having that at all and having it government funded, you are inviting ICE, FBI, whoever, to show up and knock on the door one day and say, I want all your stuff. And I joke, but not so much. I told the chief was like, well, I would go to jail. I said, you know what, chief? I think you would. But I think one or two people down the line, someone's not going to want to go to jail and they're going to cooperate. And that's just the reality of when you're facing something at this level. Why would we create an environment where we're enabling that kind of police state to come into our city? I mean, I can't control what Brian Lagarde does with Project NOLA.
Why? That's a great question, though. Like, why can't we?
So that is, ironically, the second surveillance bill, which is Helena's bill, actually does that. Part of the issue with Brian Lagarde and Project NOLA is that, and I don't know if you knew this, the way they work, let's say there's a robbery at the corner of St. Charles Avenue. Police calls Lagarde and says, we need data regarding a robbery around this time on St. Charles Avenue. And Brian Lagarde's response, allegedly, is, I'll look at the tape and give you a call. Now, any lawyer will tell you that's a problem. And the chief says it's a problem because even if there's not footage of the guy they're looking for doing it, if it proves the guy they're looking for didn't do it, he's not required to disclose that.
And so let's just pause for a moment. For people that don't know, Project NOLA has a series of cameras that the businesses or residents
They offer free cameras, business and residences, to be part of their surveillance network. It's supposed to be to fight crime, but I mean that's what it's sold.
he could
as.
sell it all to Trump's friends,
Right. But so the challenge is, so they install the cameras. Part of what Helena's bill does, which is the second surveillance bill, it says that in order for Project NOLA to exist, it has to be under NOPD. And so that bill solves the problem insofar as making Project NOLA have governors on it to be more transparent. And for example, of cases where you need to get access to the footage, they have to produce the footage. Now, that being said, I would not be surprised if Helena's bill passes if Project NOLA just says we're not going to do New Orleans anymore and leaves, or tries to find out a way around it some other way. But even the NOPD acknowledges that on some level with Project NOLA, they're kind of cowboys. Now, that being said, they're cowboys that have more rights than we do as far as the government trying to get their footage. He could tell the government to pound sand, and he would have more rights under Jay Morris's law than NOPD would, because he's not a elected official, appointed official, or public employee. He's a private business. And it's very typical in Louisiana that they give more power to private businesses to tell the government to go away than they give well-meaning jurisdictions that don't want to expose all their citizens to being surveilled.
Yeah, so
What do we got left, Earl?
energy.
Yes.
Energy oversight. I've heard you speak about this in the past, but right now, with this utility, the bills, high bills, even in which part of Louisiana they're about to do this?
The meta plant.
The meta plant. What are we gonna do about?
Well, just so everybody hears me when I say this, rate increases from the meta plant do not affect Energy New Orleans.
Okay.
It's only in the jurisdiction of Energy Louisiana. Now, what I will say, if you're in Energy Louisiana, your bill's going up. Because as much as they say that the overall cost is going to be eaten by Meta, when it goes into overruns and it's more expensive than they think, it is going to be borne by the ratepayers. There is a tremendous tension in how our oversight is done as a council. What I want to say is a couple of things, and I want to set the record straight on a couple of things. Our ability to regulate energy comes through the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. It is a federal power that is given to regulators like ourselves. A lot of people in these races say, I'm going to make energy pay all the arrearages off. that is nonsense and cannot happen. With the public co-ops, we have that ability, but with a company that we are regulating under FERC, the only way you're going to pay off arrearages is to add money and bills on people who are paying their bills on time. Now, what we can do, like when we got the Grand Gulf settlement, when we get a large pot of money, we get that to either invest in the system or to do offsets for rates. Like we can do rebates. Mm-hmm. Now, the challenge is Entergy Energy Louisiana PSC did a rebate. And I want to say they're rebating $75 million over 3 years, and that'll come as one-time bill credits or credits offsetting for a 3-year period. That seems like a good idea. It's actually a terrible idea. When you take a large sum of money and you just do it to offset those individual bills for a very fixed period, and the same time they did that, they passed a $1.9 billion resilience plan that's going to
go. Wait. You're saying a rebate to give back that's a terrible idea.
I'm going to explain to you why. In the same breath, they passed a $1.9 billion resiliency plan that was also sent to all those ratepayers. So they have a $75 million rebate, okay? Mm-hmm. Everybody, that goes to approximately 1 million customers. It's going to be in like a couple of bucks on your bill, $2-3 on your bill. Maybe not that, a couple cents on your bill over 3 years. They passed a $1.9 billion resilience plan. That's going to be $7 to $8 on your bill pretty much forever. So they gave you a rebate. Mm-hmm. Then they also passed a new investment that's going to eat the rebate and go past it. What we did differently is we took our $250 million. We took roughly 180 of it and said, we're not going to, Energy New Orleans want us to do a $1 billion resilience plan. When we analyzed it, it was nonsense. Half the stuff in that plan was reliability. Reliability, if a part on a pole breaks, that's not resilience, that's because Energy didn't change the part out. Yeah. What they like to do is mix the two up. It's sort of like if I'm paying my car note and I got a lease car or something breaks on it, it's covered under the insurance, right? Mm-hmm. It's like if you drove it to a mechanic and he tried to sell you something that wasn't covered. That's what Energy does. So not only that, but that $1.9 billion that they put out there in that resilience plan, that's before interest, because Energy charges you anywhere from 14 to 20% interest when they loan you money. So they're loaning the government $1.9 billion, charging the interest. It'll at least be 25, 40 years before it falls off. We said, we're not doing your plan. We're not going to borrow money from Energy because we didn't want to increase people's rates for an unforeseen period of time. We took $180 million of that $250. We loaned it to Energy at 9%, which they have to give us credit for, which turned into about $320 million. That is our resilience plan, which costs ratepayers $0.
Who monitors the maintenance on Entergy's stuff? I know you guys are more.
We're actually having a meeting. We have had multiple meetings about reliability, because that is where I've been butting heads with Energy, because I don't believe ratepayers should play when things break that they're supposed to take care of. I mean, John Oliver has this great episode about the PNG fire in California where half of California burned down because a hook broke. Because it was a $5 hook, and the company was so damn cheap that rather than check to see if the hooks were working, it wore down to the point, popped, caused a multi-trillion-dollar fire. We have a docket we're working with right now to redo our reliability plan to require them to do additional checks for reliability. We're fighting with them right now over lightning arresters has been a big issue.
But it's still self-reporting on Entergy's part? Or
No, really the way regulators do this, because the biggest thing that we struggle with as regulators is not trying to do things that make your bill go up. Energy will do whatever we want them to do if they can charge you for it. Mm-hmm. So what has worked for us recently is that once you create a requirement and you attach a fine to not doing the requirement, they do it. That's what we did with communications, which is why we tagged, as we did after Charles Rice with the Astor power plant. We're working through doing something similar with reliability, saying these are our expectations. We pay you every month on our bills to make sure that you're switching out basically lightning rods. Mm-hmm. A lot of the shortages you see are because they're these insulated, effectively lightning rods that when lightning strikes, supposed to not have the power go out. When the power goes out from a lightning strike at substations, That's because the lightning rod failed. Those are things they should be pay them to be checking and to put the right ones in.
Is there a way to say, for instance, okay, I expect 30 days of electricity for what I'm paying, but let's say I only get 29 days or 27 days.
That we're looking into the possibility and seeing how under FERC we can charge them for lost power. The biggest issue, to answer your other question, we take credits like you said. I told you we spent 180 to 250 on resilience. That's like hardening the grid so hurricanes don't hurt us. We're taking part of the money from that, working with groups like Together New Orleans to do virtual power plants and the like to insulate the grid so power's more safe, and we're doing bill credits. We've actually been fighting with energy for years because the council regularly does bill credits on your bill to keep your bill lower. Energy does not disclose how much money we're spending to keep the bill low. And that's something we've been fighting with because we're like, listen, you need to let us show ratepayers that we beat you in a lawsuit and your lawsuit money is keeping your bill low. We also, after COVID and even to date, we're still doing arrearage management through TCA for gas arrearages because gas has been a hot mess because the gas prices were doing this for years. So, I mean, the hope is we're doing a tremendous amount of investment with solar energy. The true expense of your bill, it is the rate, but it's when we have to buy power off our network. And when we are using more power than we have allocated, we have to go buy it from other networks, and that power is very, very expensive, and they pass that on to your bill. So the more we can do with virtual power plants, with solar investment, to locally offset that, it's going to drop your bill. Like the solar power plant we're doing in New Orleans at Gordon Plaza, the one at St. Mary's, there's one being by Abramson. As those come online with virtual power plants, when we're generating power locally, and we don't have to go buy power from Michigan or from Kentucky, when we buy their power, I mean, the whole Grand Gulf lawsuit, which was a nuclear plant, that lawsuit was because we bought part of a nuclear power plant that didn't work. It kept shutting down, and if you're paying for a power plant to keep your power low and it shuts down, I got to go buy power from Kentucky.
And that shows down.
National, basically, that was the lawsuit. We paid you to have this power online to keep our power low, and every time it went down, you cost us money. That's how we got that massive lawsuit, because we were saying, what's the point of us buying into a dirty nuclear power plant if we can't even get the power out of it?
Well, we've covered a lot of ground here today. We talked about energy, the jail, surveillance, housing, and I know we've gone a bit, and but I just wanted to say thank you for being here, and if there's any parting words you want to say to the people, feel free.
Well, I think elections are important. I think that especially at times like this, it's not just an issue of having to fight with the state and federal government. It's about knowing how all those different levels work and how you navigate how you fight. Because the reality is that we are not going to arm wrestle and outgun the federal government. We have to outsmart them. And you have to have people in office who understand the ins and out of everything from the local, state, and federal level, who understand the law in a way that when we're challenged, we can defend ourselves. The whole reason why we have that charter amendment right after y'all's dealing with the city attorney is that, so as you know, there's a charter amendment that says that our city attorney has to be independent and can't work for the council of the mayor. Stuart Cathy, who's a senator from Monroe, he is offering a bill for the mayor of Monroe to have the governor appoint the fire chief. And he's doing that because the mayor is fighting with the council and wants to pick the guy he wants to pick, but they're surrendering local power to the governor just to do this thing. The reason why doing that city attorney law is so important is that we as a council pass laws constantly to protect people and to make sure people in our city are safe and included. We don't want there ever to be a situation where a mayor can tell the city attorney to stand down. Because the person that's going to sue the federal government, going to sue the state, defend all of our rights is that city attorney. And what we've seen over the last 4 years is the city attorney regularly takes a powder whenever the mayor tells them to do so. We don't ever want it to happen again. And especially right now, with the way things are going at the national and state level, it's more important to have attorneys who their job is to defend our laws, our ordinance, and our charter, and not to worry about any of the politics. Because the law is the law, defend the law, and the laws in the city are here to protect people.
Well, that's a great point. JP, thanks for being
Thank
here.
you.
We'll see you on the
Good
campaign
seeing you
trail.
again.
Appreciate you.
Appreciate you.
Thank you.
All right. I've got